In this video, I'm going to be telling you about every single entity indoors, as well as some super secret tricks on how to counter each of them. Alright, first up, we got the most popular entity in the whole of doors. And obviously, this is the figure boss. This is the main entity indoors, and it's kind of like the main antagonist of the hotel. It appears at the library, which is like halfway through the game, and at the end of the game, which is the electrical room. Basically, the way this guy attacks is by following any sounds or vibrations. So if you're crouching the whole time, then you should be good. Just make sure you don't decide to sprint. And his damage is literally instant death, so get insta-killed if he touches you. Something cool that you guys might not know is that the figure boss actually went through a few transformations before it's the one we all know and love today. The version 1 kind of looked like this, which is very weird. Kind of like something a 3-year-old would make out of clay. Very weird. Then we got the version 2, which is actually pretty good. And then we got the final version, version 3. And this is the best by far. And this is what's currently in the game. So when you first enter the figure boss, it's going to be when you open the doors to the library, where the figure boss is going to roar, let out a loud screech, and then go hide itself behind a bookshelf. And a bit after that, a lamp is actually going to fall to the floor and shatter, which causes the figure boss to run towards the broken lamp. So make sure you stay away from that, because if you're standing there, then you're dead. And then what you need to do once you're in the library is collect a bunch of papers to open the next door. Just make sure you're crouched while doing all of this, because if you don't, well, you're dead. And like I mentioned before, the figure boss is literally blind. It cannot see you whatsoever. It can only hear you and feel the vibrations from the floor. And a pretty cool thing that you guys might not know is that the figure boss actually increases its walk speed by 0.75 times for every book that you collect in the library. So before collecting 3 books, you actually be able to outrun the figure boss, but after that, you will actually be a little bit faster than you. And once you collected every book except the last one, he's literally like double your speed. So you're not outrunning this guy. But if you really want to outrun him, then you can just use vitamins. The next place you encounter the figure boss is at the electrical room. And this is when the gate is open. The figure boss will run down the stairs and go after you. And it knows your exact location this time, so make sure you keep walking. In this part of the game, you need to search for 10 fuses on the shelves, and it can sense your heartbeat, which is pretty weird because I don't know how it can hear that, but I guess it's a monster for a reason. Then you gotta finish the rest of the quest to complete the game. And that's the last we see of this boss. Unless we get to see a Doors part 2, that is. But anyways, let's head over to the next entity. Alright, the next entity that we got here is called the Guiding Light. You guys have definitely seen this before, but I bet you didn't know that's what it's called. And the Guiding Light is basically a friendly entity indoors, and it appears to basically assist you with doing things that might be kind of difficult to do. And it's actually the entity that gives you tips after you die to certain monsters. And the way this thing looks like, it's just a sparkling aqua color. And you can actually see this entity in every part of the map. So after being in a dark room for around 20 seconds to 1 minute, the Guiding Light will actually highlight any doors while also lighting up the surrounding area, which is going to help you a ton to exit that room. And if there's a room key in the room, that will also be highlighted with the Guiding Light. But keep in mind, you have to be in that room for around 20 seconds to 1 minute for this to work. And when you're actually running from the Seek boss, the Guiding Light actually shows you the way you're supposed to go. And if you just follow it, you should be fine. And if you don't, well, you're dead. You can see it right here doing the Seek chase. It shows you parts to crouch down into, and it even shows you the right door, so you don't need to check all of them. But anyways, let's head over to the next entity. So next up, we got the most popular entity in this game, and it's probably the entity that you'll encounter the most in your playthroughs. And this is obviously the Rush entity. And it's called Rush because it basically just rushes through the doors very, very fast. And if you're not hiding in a cupboard when it passes you, you die. And this is actually one of the few entities in the game that actually insta-kills you. And you only encounter this during the hotel. So there's actually a way to know that the Rush boss is coming before you even see it or hear it. And that's if the lights flicker. If the lights flicker, that means you should probably count to 5 and hop in a cupboard. Because if you don't, you're getting killed by this entity instantly. And this can be kind of problematic when you're playing with around 4 players, because 2 people cannot hide in the same cupboard at the same time. So make sure you do it properly. Anyways, with that, let's head over to the next entity. Alright, the next one we got on this list is the Ambush entity. And this entity also had 3 different versions in the game. Version 1 is a scrapped version where it's kind of like red and it just looks really weird. Then we got another variation of the scrapped version, which is actually a little bit cooler than the previous one, and I think this might look better than what's currently in game, but I'm not really sure. It might be preference. And this is also an entity in the game that insta-kills you, and it's kind of just a better version of the Rush entity. It basically just speeds through just like the Rush does, but this time it actually rebounds the rooms 2 to 6 times, and it'll kill you if you're in its hitbox. So the way you actually defeat, or I guess pass this entity, is by exiting and entering the cupboards at the right times. And if you don't do this properly, you're gonna be dead. And keep in mind, you cannot stay in a cupboard for too long, because then you get attacked by a different monster, but you don't take that much damage for it. But it actually does kick you out of the cupboard, which is not a good thing when you're up against an entity like this. But overall, it's not the hardest entity in the game, but it is a pretty difficult one to get past. And you have to have pretty good mechanical skills to pass this one. Alright, the next entity that we got on this list is also a pretty popular one, and I'm obviously talking about Seek. Seek is also an entity which has had 2 different versions, and the old one actually looks very, very creepy. In my opinion, a little bit creepier than the current version. I mean, just look at it, bro. This is like something that would show up in my nightmares. Anyway, the way the Seek entity works, it's kind of like a secondary antagonist of the hotel, and you'll always confront this NPC twice in a playthrough. One encounter takes place before the library and the other one after, and they're actually kind of randomly generated. The way you beat the Seek entity is by finishing the obstacle course that you have to play through. You have to do all of this on a timer while the Seek entity is chasing you. And if you want to do this correctly, just make sure you follow the guiding light, because if you don't, you're probably going to be dead. Getting caught by Seek in this run is just going to insta-kill you, and you take 45 damage from the fallen chandeliers. And the fire actually shows up towards the end of the run, along with a bunch of the Seek's hands. Just make sure you don't walk into them. That's pretty much it for this entity. Let's head over to the next one. Alright, next entity we got here is called Halt, and this kind of looks like a diamond crystal, and it's also had an old version which looks kind of like poop. I'm literally not kidding. Look at this. But the way the Halt entity works is that it basically just appears in front of you when you're walking down a certain hallway, and it does a total of 60 damage, so it's not going to be an insta kill, but it still does a butt ton of damage. So just make sure you don't look at it and try to turn away as fast as you can if you do. And there's not really any other tips or anything else about this entity. It's just pretty simple. Don't look at it. And speaking of entities that you cannot look at, next up we got the Eyes NPC, and this is also supporting hostile entity just like the previous one. And the only tip for this entity is just don't look at it. It literally just damages you when you look at it. But unlike the Halt entity, it can't just randomly spawn in front of you. There's a slow spawn in animation, and if you have a fast enough reaction time, you should be able to turn away before you even take 1 tick of damage. For each tick that you look at it, you actually lose 1 health, and I'm not actually sure how long a tick is, but it is way less than a second. And if you look at it for even a bit, it's just gonna laser your health down and you're gonna be dead. And if it's blocking a place that you actually need to go towards, you just have to turn your character around and just face away from it while you get to the door you have to go through. And this entity has actually also had a previous version which looks really terrible. I like the current one way more. It looks way more monsterish, you could say, which is a lot better than just whatever this is. Anyways, that's it for this entity. Let's go to the next one. Alright, the next entity that we got here is called Screech, and this is an entity that shows up when you are in a dark room. And basically you're gonna hear a sound that goes like psst. And if you don't fling your cursor on your screen to see where that sound came from, and you don't stare down this creepy monster, well, then it's just gonna attack you, jump scare you, and it's gonna eat a total of 40 of your health. But this one is very easy to counter, probably the weakest entity on this list if I'm being honest, other than the guiding light, but we don't really count that because it only does 40 damage and it's very easy. Basically just look at it. That's pretty much it. Okay, so the next entity that we got here is Dupe, and I've fallen for this so many times. Basically what this entity does is place a fake door sign on one of the random doors in the room, and if you actually try to open that door, you just get jump scared and 40 of your health taken away. And I actually don't know if there's a way to counter this. You kind of just have to lose 40 HP. This typically occurs in larger rooms, so I guess be careful with what door you open, but I don't know if that's gonna work. Anyways, let's go to the next one. Alright, next entity that we got here is called Glitch, and before I tell you how the glitch entity works, I kind of have to explain doors to you. You know when you open the doors in the game and you just keep going? Well, if you decide to turn back after you're at like door 20, you're gonna realize that you can only go so far back. You won't be able to literally go back to door 0. That's just not how the game works. It doesn't keep everything rendered. The old rooms are going to de-render. That means if you're standing in a very old room while your friend is actually rendering the new rooms in the game, then you're going to encounter the glitch NPC, and it's just going to jump scare you and teleport you to a part of the game where the rooms are generated. Now the NPC actually does 0 damage, so the only thing bad about this is a jump scare, but previously it did around 10 to 40. So you have to be careful back then. But anyways, you can only encounter this entity when you are playing with at least 1 other players, because you can't really generate new rooms and stay back by yourself unless you're a hacker. But let's head over to the next entity. Alright, next up we got a pretty interesting entity, and this guy is called Jack, and his description literally just says ooga booga. Basically the places this guy appears at is at the hotel and the mines. He does literally 0 damage, and what he does is just make a loud noise to scare you, and then he just disappears instantly. That's pretty much it for this guy. Alright, next up we got the Hide entity, and no one actually knows what this entity looks like. All we know is that it's actually inside every closet in the game, and the reason this entity exists is to stop you from hiding in the same closet over an extended period of time. If you hide too long, then it just kicks you out, and you won't be able to hide in a closet for the next 10 to 20 seconds. And also does a total of 40 damage, so make sure you don't stay in a closet for too long. This can be kind of difficult to do when you're fighting against the ambush boss, so if you want to master the game, you're gonna have to learn how to enter and exit closets, I guess. Next up we got an entity that I personally hate, and this guy is called Timothy. He's a little spider, and basically he just jump scares you when you open stuff like drawers, and you can find these literally anywhere, but usually in the big rooms. He does a total total of 5 damage, and he just scares the crap out of you. That's why I hate this guy. And he's just a little spider. Well, that's it for him. He does pretty much nothing else except for look a little weird. Alright, next up we got Window, but you can also call this one Sally because that's what the file name says. Anyways, this face basically just shows up on a random window. It does literally nothing else, 0 damage. It just looks a bit scary. It doesn't even make any noise like Jack. That's pretty much it for this little dude. Alright, now we got the Shadow entity, and this guy is very, very basic, but he's also the rarest entity that you can encounter in the whole game. I don't know the exact chats, but it is very, very rare. And basically what he does is he just kind of pops up when you open a door, and it's completely random which room or which door he would pop up in. It doesn't even make any noise. It just appears and disappears instantly. That's pretty much it. But if you do encounter this, then consider yourself very, very lucky. Alright, next up we got another basic entity, and this little guy is called Snare, and he appears in the hotel. And basically what he does is he just kind of traps a player for 3 to 6 seconds when you step on it. So just be careful where you're going, I guess. But he literally only does like 10 damage, so it doesn't even matter that much. And tips for avoiding him is just don't walk on him. That's pretty much it.